It's now COVID also here in Uganda and in our homes. We just need to be extra careful. Now, away from the COVID talk, thank you so much. Let's observe the SOPs and do what we're supposed to do. If you have nothing to do in town, don't come to town. If you have nothing to do at the neighborhood, please don't go. Let's avoid these social gatherings and social meetings for some time until life gets back to normal. Now, from that, welcome to our discussion this morning on GMU Extra. And of course, this morning we'll talk about issues of child labor. And I have the experts in studios with me. Joining me is Mr. Douglas Opio. He's the Executive Director of the Federation of Uganda Employers. You're welcome, Ndugu Douglas Opio.
Thank you, sir.
I'm happy to have you again.
Great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Together with Mr. Douglas Opio is Mr. Amriat Bernard, and he's the Assistant Commissioner, Labor Inspectorate from the Ministry of Labor, Gender and Social Development. You're welcome, Mr. Amriat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Jagenda. It's a pleasure being here, and good morning, our viewers and listeners.
How are you managing COVID yourself?
Well, of course, we are trying to cope up with the SOPs that were put in place by government, Ministry of Health in particular, and of course even us from the labor sector. We're also able to come up with our own standards that the employers and workers out there are supposed to follow.
Okay.
Like PPEs, just a personal protective equipment.
Okay.
Yes.
How is it back home in the village? I don't know where you even come from.
I come from Palisa district.
Oh, I thought you are Amuriat from Amuria.
No. Oh. We're just layoffs at university.
Okay.
87 to 90, 91. Yes.
So you come from Palisa?
I come from Palisa.
How is the situation in Palisa?
Well, for now, the situation I think is still calm, except the drought. The drought is actually, I'm told, the crops are withering that have been planted, and people are desperate, especially that's actually bad. So this year and next year are likely to be very bad years for this country. Okay. Amidst the COVID, of course, situation in the country.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Muriat.
It's a pleasure.
Mr. Pio.
Yes, sir.
How are you managing with COVID? I'm surprised something is happening in Uganda. Ugandans are actually putting on masks now rightly, and they are complying. Something is happening to us.
Yeah, I think the message has moved across. We have basically been woken up. In the past, we were talking about COVID, but we are talking about it in Italy, we are talking about it in Brazil. Recently, we are talking about it, how people are dying in India. But it's right here with us. Like you rightly said, it would be almost impossible to find anybody who has not been affected by COVID directly. In the past, we were saying that 9 out of 10 businesses have been affected. But now, it's impossible to find a business that has not been affected by COVID. Yeah, literally all businesses have been affected. Every individual has been affected by COVID-19 one way or another. But the bit I'm liking, and I don't know why it had to reach this far, that we are now observing the SOPs. I don't think we have to wait until somebody dies, then we begin to follow the SOPs. You don't have to wait until somebody in your home falls sick, then you begin to follow the SOPs. I think the Ministry of Health has done a tremendous job together with the head of state, trying to sensitize us. All of us know what to do. All of us, even in social media, now you have even home-based care. Everything, all the information is with us. So I just hope we maintain the same. Because there is a tendency to relax when things go a little bit down again. Then maybe we resume to our usual ways. But this is a serious disease. Let's together take care. Let's be one another's keeper. I've seen very good messages, including from Private Sector Foundation, saying it's in your hands. It's in your hands to stop the epidemic. You are the means for it to go and reach your neighbor. So if you protect yourself, you protect us all.
You protect others. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Let's get to our discussion this morning. I'll start with you, Mr. Muriat, the Assistant Commissioner for Labor Inspectorate from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. We talk about child labor, and why have we as a country or as a world come out to discuss issues of child labor now? What have we seen, what have we sensed, and what embeds it?
Well, child labor has been there time immemorial, and of course it is, we are saying now, but because of, in 2019, July, the UN came up with a resolution making 2021 the International Year of Elimination of Child Labor. And the theme for this year, we have just had a commemoration which we had on Saturday on 12th of June, again which the ILO adopted in 2002 as the World Day Against Child Labor. So the UN came up with a resolution urging all the member states of the UN to take action and steps towards the elimination of child labor. And of course, earlier in 2019, again the ILO, one of our international partner organizations, came up with the Alliance 8.7, which of course is hinged on SDG 8.7. This is on decent work and economic growth, but this one specifically is the member states are being asked to take action to ensure that child labor, especially the worst forms, are eliminated in 2025. And then, of course, forced labor, modern slavery, and modern slavery by 2030, which is again hinged on our agenda 2030, 2063 in here. So, but child labor, as I said, has been here, and the government of Uganda, as far back as 1999, started interventions. We had a program called International Elimination of Child Labor, IPEC, and government started implementing interventions that were geared towards elimination of child labor in Uganda, and quite a number of projects and programs have been put in place. The ministry in 2006 came up with a national policy on elimination of child labor, which of course later on again, some of the principles were also built in the National Employment Policy of 2011. And of course, as a ministry, we have been able to put in place laws that have helped us to try to mitigate and to reduce cases of child labor. Child labor actually is a serious problem in this country. The recent statistics by UBOS actually show that the percentage used to be 40%, which is 2048. The figure has doubled. It has gone now to 28%, of course, arising out of the COVID situation. When the schools government took a decision to close schools, all learners were sent back home. And of course, because as an impact of COVID, some employers, the breadwinners, lost their jobs, their companies closed. And so children were seen as an option to try to get some additional money to put food on the table. So it is not now that they were just taking action on child labor. The problem has been there, except now that because it has become a global problem, so the partner states of the UN and the ILO are actually trying to take serious steps to end child labor. Okay. That's why it has now come up, but it has been there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Ndugwa, I welcome you to the conversation, Mr. Opio. Let me hear from you. You've, as the Federation of Uganda Employers, yes, you've been in this fight against child labor for quite a long time. And I just want to know what the challenges you're finding and how you're actually managing now that we have a problem, like he's highlighted, the commissioner here. He's highlighted the issue of COVID-19, that the children who would be in schools now are actually at home. And because they're at home, they bring extra burden, extra cost, and extra everything. So we find them again getting into working to be able to also fend for the families in a way. Let me hear from you.
You know, child labor has been a serious challenge for us. And at the Federation, we have been engaged in efforts around child labor since 1999. And at that time, I think the government efforts in the fight against child labor seemed to be bearing fruits even already at the preliminary stages. You remember just 2 years earlier, the government had instituted UPE because we want children to be in school and not to be at work. But even when the government had brought in place the UPE policy allowing more children to go to school, we still had a challenge of poverty. The poverty levels were quite high. And poverty is one of the root causes of child labor, so to say. So because of high levels of poverty, we have, of course, had a lot of government programs, plan for modernization of agriculture, NADS, the planning framework, the poverty eradication action plans, and several other plans over the years. But for me, where the Federation comes in is in the space that the employers, well-established employers, do not in any way exacerbate the situation. Many employers who are well-established, they don't actually use child labor. But then the parents, because they want some extra earns, they tend to use children. People who are in their supply chain, they tend to use children. So what we have been doing over the years at the Federation is to help the employers undertake due diligence, to try and understand within their supply chains, are there elements of child labor. That challenge has become a lot more serious, especially with COVID-19. Like Bernard has rightly said, a lot of people are struggling to find a means of livelihood. And as they struggle, one of their resort is to try and use their children to support them. And now it's even more easy for them to do that because the children are at home. They are not at school. So it's easier for them to take advantage of the children at home. Okay.
Mr. Commissioner Muriat, Mr. Assistant Commissioner, could you please just highlight to us the problem of child labor in Uganda vis-a-vis other countries? Because I think there was a report that a study that was done or conducted in this country in 2017, and it showed how bad we're actually doing in as far as child labor is concerned. And let me also know from you the prevalence and the sectoral distribution of child labor in this country.
Yes, in 2016-2017, according to the UBOS study, the situation, as I mentioned earlier, the children that were involved in the worst forms of some form of work were 2,048. But as I said, the situation, because the latest report that has just been released by UBOS 2019-2020, which now shows the situation has actually doubled. So it is now over 4,000 children who are involved in some work, trying to support their families. And so the situation actually is bad, and I think, of course, I suppose because this was the just sample, but I think UBOS is planning to carry out a census next year, where, of course, definitely likely to put some of the variables. So I suppose after that, the census, the situation may even be worse, as we said, because of the COVID. And worse still, again, some schools are started opening in a phased manner. But again, the schools are again the second round, close again, sent learners back home. So the situation is really worrying. As he said, it's a big challenge. And of course, this is the socio-economic problem of this country. And it is likely to, of course, to increase poverty, especially among the youth, which, of course, again, because of the attendant factors, of course, to lead to issues like unemployment. The sectors that are mainly hit, or where children are heavily involved in child labor, especially in agriculture, in the coffee, in the tea, in the tobacco, and then, of course, in the sugarcane growing. Early this year, there was an incident in Kayonga, where the Honorable Nataba did kind of like alarm, and she arrested 21 children who were involved, actually being transported to work in a sugarcane plantation. So I was part of the team that went there, and actually we found that the problem is quite grave. The children are so much used in the planting, in the digging, and of course in the cutting of sugarcane, and some of them, of course, are involved in the loading. And why we are saying so is because of the tools that are used in the sectors. Like in agriculture, they have pesticides which are harmful to the health of the children. The tools that they use, of course, are sharp. They can harm the health of the children. Then, of course, even working long hours, and of course, the exposure to harsh conditions, climatic conditions, when it is hot like now. The children are not supposed to be in those kind of working environment. But of course, again, like if you have heard on 1st May this year, where His Excellency the President launched our National Action Plan, he was responding to Honorable Malango, where he was saying that for him, when he was 4 years old, he used to kind of like look after the cows, and then at 8, he started milking. So there's, of course, obviously a confusion here, I think, which needs to be highlighted and clarified, that child labor is not child work.
It's not what?
Child labor is not child work. Child work is allowed. This one which we do at home, under light, supervised, and for livelihoods, eventually skills when somebody grows up. And of course, it should be not so much of what hazardous and whatever. But child labor, what we regard as child labor, is a work that denies a child first and foremost an opportunity to go to school or to go for a training opportunity. And then, of course, it has effects, these harmful effects to the conditions of the children, working in those other I mentioned chemicals which are hazardous to the child, the tools, the nature of tools, and then, of course, the gold mines across this country, in Busia, in Karamoja, around Rupa area. Children are involved in the mining of gold, and of course, they have to get it from the ground. They have to kind of like put it in water, and that kind of thing. And so it is not good for the development and the growth of the child. So child work is allowed, and it is good and supervised, and it is light. But this other one, which is hazardous and it has an effect on the child, that's what we call
on the sectoral distribution of child labor, Mr. Pio. He's talked about agriculture, for example, and you'll notice that it's what defines many of our families, many of our homes. How would you tell that children getting involved in agriculture in the home are actually being subjected to child labor and not child work, which you've also just spoken about here now?
What we are talking about here is commercial agriculture.
Commercial agriculture.
Yeah, we are not talking about a child giving support to the family, tying goats around when they have come back from school, maybe spreading things so that they can dry, those light work basically. We are not talking about that. But just in terms of percentage, so that we get the nature of the problem. Child labor, the recent report that was released by UNICEF shows that 70% of children are in agriculture, doing child labor in agriculture. And then we have about 20% who are doing child labor related work in the services sector, and then 10% doing it in the industry. Now, just to add a bit of dimension to what Bernard has said, half of these children are actually in hazardous work. They are in work that is injurious to their emotional and physical well-being, but also that prevents them from going to school. So child labor in a country like ours ordinarily should be a far much more serious problem than we are experiencing now, because by default actually the global situation is that sub-Saharan Africa is the worst affected when it comes to child labor. And this period, unfortunately, is the first period in nearly 20 years when we are beginning to see again a reversal of our efforts towards the elimination of child labor. From 2000 to 2016, you can't imagine 94 million children were withdrawn from child labor. But just
between what and what?
Between 2000 and 2016, 94, about 16 years, 94 million children were withdrawn from child labor. But you can't imagine, just recently, about just 4 years, we have seen again a rise in the number of children going into child labor. Actually 8.6 million children who are again getting involved in child labor. So we are actually at a more critical point when the reversal of the achievements we have made is happening. And that's why all the stakeholders need to rethink again, need to refocus again. And I just want to highlight the employers in the agriculture sector, especially the established one, the kakiras, the tea factories. We have seen tremendous effort by them, not only in trying to prevent children from coming to their workplaces, but they have also been supporting in terms of scholastic materials, and recently helping a lot with the COVID efforts as well, because sometimes children are increasingly becoming vulnerable because the parents want them to support certain needs. Like now, everybody is realizing masks are important, sanitizers are important. Not long from now, you'll be seeing people using children to try and have those facilities available for use at home. So I just want to applaud the effort, especially of the companies in the agriculture sector, who have been supporting us a lot to fight child labor.
How supportive is the legal framework in this country to help that?
The legal framework is actually quite good. Bernard, of course, is the custodian. But if you look at it this way, not until 14 years, no child is allowed to work, including light work. Yeah, including light work. But after that, the child is allowed to do some light work under the supervision of an adult. The only challenge we have in Uganda is that our economy is largely informal. Whereas you can make headway in preventing children from being engaged in child labor, in formal work setting, it's very difficult, for instance, to stop children from being engaged in the informal sector. And that's where the exploitation is really rather dire. If you look at it, for instance, when you're driving back home, you'll most often find a child trying to sell on the roadside. And it's very difficult for the government to stop that kind of child labor. Child labor in established companies is a lot easier to do. But the legal framework, from an employer's point, I see we have a good legal framework. We also have specific child labor policy. We also, like right now, have a national action plan for the elimination of child labor running from 2021 to 2025. So we, from a legal standpoint, from a policy standpoint, I don't see any major gap at all.
In a country where we all agree that the youth are the majority and majority of those are unemployed, how best can we fight child labor and we actually succeed, Mr. Amuriat?
Well, of course, that is one of the, like Mr. Pio mentioned, there are two push factors into child labor. One, like you mentioned, poverty. Poverty, of course, is increasing, especially amidst this COVID situation, and then, of course, an unemployment that is very high. But again, of course, it goes around to what I was saying, that you see, the moment this child is denied an opportunity of getting some skills from education, child is denied an opportunity to go to school, is denied an opportunity to go to a vocational school. Tomorrow we will have no skill. And that is why you see sometimes there are jobs out there looking for people, the youth you are talking about. Yeah. Of course, we regard by law here from 18 years to about 30 years. Yeah. So the challenge with this is the mismatch and of course the lack of the skills, appropriate skills, which I think again, like Mr. Pio did mention, that the Ministry of Education and government at large is trying to see to it that we embrace vocationalization, because we have also realized that this normal, the routine education, which we begin right from pre-nursery and of course continue to university, many get out with the very actually not much with gainful skills. So those who have been able to like, of course, right now we are in we're talking about oil and gas. What that sector has done has deliberately decided to build skills in the oil and gas sector. So likewise, I think this child labor thing of ours, if we can insist on saying children time for school, not for work, and then give them appropriate skills. To me, in my view, I think that can help them. When they get appropriate skills, then they, and not necessarily because you see, again, the training, the curriculum in this country is such that whoever finishes university is only thinking about white-collar jobs. But those blue-collar jobs, somebody should be able to get a skill and go and do your own other thing. Go and manage your own enterprise. Go and start your own business. So skills, appropriate skills should be those kind of skills that we need that can help us in reducing child labor, and then of course also reducing the problem of unemployment in the country.
Okay. According to the UNICEF report that Mr. Opio here has alluded to, 70% are doing labor in agriculture, 20% in services, 10% of those in industry.
Yeah.
And those in industry, I think majority of them are actually meddled into, again, very risky tasks like mining in the very risky gold mines.
Yeah, sure.
I'm only thinking it is, according to some people, a fortune that these children are trying to chase after or look for.
Yeah.
How we come in as a government to actually see how to help this? I just want to know, because we know that the problem is actually there. We know where these mines are. We see the people in the mines, and it's very dangerous for children. But I now want to know from the government, which you represent, what they're actually doing to mitigate that situation.
Well, of course, child labor is one of those, there are sectors where child labor is hidden. Like I did mention agriculture. The first day when we went there, they got to know that we had actually gone. When they saw the government car, they decided to go behind.
Next time, don't go with the red number plate. Next time, go.
So it is one of those challenges. It's a hidden issue. So, but of course, government, like you did mention about it is the responsibility of government to put in place policies. We have a national child labor policy in place. 2006, we're about to review it. We have a national employment policy, which has interventions geared towards addressing child labor. Of course, we have elaborate labor laws that prohibit and protect children against child labor. But again, these labor standards of ours provide for an inspection service. Across this country, every district, right from the ministry headquarters, we have labor officers. Those labor officers are also regarded as labor inspectors. Yeah. So these are mandated by law to carry out inspections and enforcement to ensure that there is compliance with the laws. But of course, we have had challenges. I don't know. Previously, you know where we started from. The districts were about 39, 37. But now we have over 142 districts, and then of course several municipal councils, town councils. So, but the law requires all this to have at least a labor officer recruited to help us with the enforcement of the labor laws of this country. But of course, the majority of them still don't have those labor officers. Rather, as the government, we have that enforcement arm to ensure compliance. Then, of course, we also do advocacy. Like this, right now, we are grateful for the opportunity. It is our role to create awareness and advocacy on the issues of child labor, especially challenges, which are, of course, very grave to the welfare and the health of the child. And then, of course, we partnerships. We build partnerships with the stakeholders. Like in the ILO terms, there's what we call a tripartite. Government has a competent authority. Then we have Federation of Ugandan Employers, and then, of course, the labor unions on the other side. That is like ILO Parliament. And usually, even when we go for those ILO meetings, we sit as such. Government together, workers together, and the employers together. And then, of course, there are other partners, development partners like UNICEF. We have Food and Agriculture Organization, International Organization of Migration. Those have been supporting among others. And then, of course, the civil society organizations. So work in partnership, then we build networks, we strengthen, we build the capacity of these institutions to help us to carry out surveys or research on issues of child labor. Okay. Which information we have been using it as evidence-based to inform policy that we have.
Okay, it's still with you, Mr. Amuriat. You'll notice that Uganda, as a member of the international community, we have quite a number of declarations, protocols, we have a number of international agreements, conventions that we sign or ratify in a way. Now, these in almost every field. We have the Abuja Declaration for Health. We have the Maputo Declaration, the Maputo Protocol for Agriculture. We have quite a number of those. Just like we have many now that talk about child laws and child labor, whatever they I just want to know our commitment as signatories to these international conventions, our commitment in fulfilling them. For example, we are also at a time when we are fulfilling the 10 years of the SDGs. They talk about the SDGs, and I think this is actually one of those, one of the SDG goals that we're trying to implement. I just want to know from you, Mr. Assistant Commissioner from the government, what is our commitment like in fulfilling these conventions that we ratify all again? Because it's one thing to say we agreed to a convention that sat in this country to actually say this should be done. We agreed to this, we agreed to that, but where is our commitment, and how much commitment do we have in ensuring that these international declarations or protocols, whatever they are, we actually fulfill them and bring them to fruition?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Once, of course, a treaty or a convention or protocols, those are normally recommendations. They are not for putting in law and practice. So, but once the convention has been adopted as a member state of the UN, like specifically on child labor, we have two conventions that are directly on elimination of child labor. Convention 138, which is on the minimum age to admission to employment.
Human age.
Minimum age of 1973, and then Convention 182, which is on the elimination of the worst forms of child labor of 1999. So government has already gone ahead and ratified these conventions. And once you ratify a convention, there are actually even those fundamental ones filed, even if you have not ratified, you're expected to put it in law and practice.
You domesticate it.
Yeah, domesticate it. You put it in law and practice. The practice now means enforcement. So you're expected to enforce and also to report regularly on what government is doing about the provisions of course, the convention provides general principles, which you can take as they are, or you can put them according to your local setting. So, of course, government is under obligation. Well, as I did mention about the laws, there are already laws in place, there are regulations that have been put in place in line with those treaties that the government has been able to ratify. And then, of course, regularly we are continuing to report on what progress that is being made on each of them.
Okay. Mr. Pio, why I'm asking that is I look at these protocols, these conventions, these treaties as performance indicators.
True.
That I have a job at UBC, and these are my performance indicators. I'm supposed to do this and this and this and this. Now that is what we set out for ourselves as countries to see. Now you, the stakeholders from this other side in the tripartite, I want to hear from you. Is this government committed enough? And what do you do to ensure that actually government commits itself to ensure that this is actually in place?
For me, the highest level of commitment is what Bernard, as the Assistant Commissioner, has just highlighted, and that's the ratification of the relevant conventions. The principal convention is the convention linked to the prohibition of child labor, and for the case of Uganda, that law has been ratified. And then also the minimum age for entry into employment. That convention has also been ratified. And then further to it, the government went ahead to develop the relevant laws as well. For our case, the Employment Act of 2006 denotes all these issues that I'm pointing out. Children are only allowed to do light work, but only when they've reached 14 years. No child below that can be engaged at all. ZADA's kind of work, children are not supposed to do it at all. So from a tripartite point, the commitment from the government at least is there. That we have seen them engaging us even in the inspection, by the way, as well. We have seen the ministry engaging us to do specific workplace inspections as well. So we are very grateful with the effort being put across. But for me, I think the main challenge is what I highlighted earlier, the informal nature of our economy. That makes then the inspection, the supervision, a much more difficult task compared to if all enterprises were formal. Just to give you a very basic example, for purposes of occupational safety and health, every single workplace is required to be registered by the government. Now, that means you have to meet the minimum standards for a given workplace. The nature of the office setting, the people who are employed there. But unfortunately, because many workplaces are operating informally, they're not registered at all. So that's where then the susceptibility of children for being involved in child labor, then it's high, because they're in a situation where they're operating almost behind the law. In as much as they're in employment. Even some are cottage industries. Somebody is working from their backyard, basically. They're working within an enclosed setting, and no labor officer has access to those places. So, but the government, I think the effort that the government has put in should be applauded. The problem is still here with us, but I think we are headed in the right direction.
We just read our budget last week, a few days ago. Do you look at anything in the budget that helps us achieve what we talk about? For example, we talk about a year that was declared by the UN General Assembly as the International Year of Elimination of Child. What are some of these pledges, first of all, from the employers, particular pledges from the employers to ensure that that actually comes on, but also looking into the budget that we just read, because the budget now informs what we are supposed to do in the next 1 year until 2022. Do we look at anything in there as helping us achieve this particular aspiration?
What I highlighted earlier on is that poverty is one of the main drivers of child labor. And as you can see in the budget that was recently passed, priority has been given to recover from the effects of COVID-19. The commitment, even already before, the government had made a commitment of 1 trillion shillings, basically, to help enterprises to recover. So by making decent employment opportunities available for people, you're basically helping us to address child labor as well. Because then if a parent has a decent employment, then they don't have to use their children in child labor. And also, several other smaller fundings have been increased. Just to give you an example, the disability fund, it was increased from 5 billion to 10 billion shillings. So you see from an economic side the commitment of government to raise additional funding. The other, which I see within the budget setting is critical for us, is education. At the Federation, we have been pushing a lot for an employer-led skills development system. And I'm grateful to the government that in 2019 that law was passed. That policy was passed. The challenge we have been putting across to them is to commit the finances required to drive the Skilling Uganda reform. And as you have seen in the recent budget that was passed, nearly 7 top-class technical institutions will be constructed. We are also seeing the processes leading towards the enactment of the TVET law is ongoing. So I see a commitment to skilling, because skills is one of the quickest route out of poverty.
TVET is not the same as BITVET?
It's the same. You know, in the past, Uganda was a unique situation. Instead of calling it technical and vocational education and training, we decided to add their business.
For BITVET?
BITVET. So, but with the new reform, we are now dropping the B. So we are retaining TVET.
The TVET.
Yeah,
why are we dropping the business?
Because it's actually an integral part. It's not a side element to TVET. It's integral. If you're being trained as a carpenter, business should be integral to your training as a carpenter. If you're being trained as a chef, business should be integral as part of your training as a chef. Not you study first your work as a chef, then go and do business later.
Okay.
So making it more integral would allow people to be self-employed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I see within the budget, and the other component which is important as well is the health. You know, health is one of those drivers for poverty. In fact, the money the poor spend on health is way high That's one of the determinants of poverty, actually, that significant proportions of people's income go into just keeping themselves healthy or just having food to eat. If most of your money goes into consumption, not investment, then you're poor.
Okay.
So we have seen government allocation, budgetary allocation to health. Hopefully that will help us a lot. And then the broader framework looking at Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, I think has been a running theme within the budget. We are appreciating the importance of using local products, and I'm quite happy with the president. He has been speaking a lot about that these are important goods. Why can't we produce them here? So we are headed with this budget. My prayer is that we implement what we have indicated in the budget.
Okay.
But otherwise,
can I also add on?
Okay, Amuriat, you wanted to say something?
Yes, please. Mr. Moderator, of course you did mention about the budget. You know, child labor is a multi-sectoral challenge.
And that's actually coming to the multi-sectoral
and you know,
coordination in there.
There is no specific budget, like you said, that this is a budget that has been put there to tackle the issues. Of course, yes, under the Department of Labor, Industrial Relations and Productivity, we have a component, a budget for elimination, eradicating child labor. But then, as I mentioned, within the multi-sectoral nature, education did mention, agriculture did mention, all these have budgets, the local governments, those town councils, the cities, they have plans, they have a budget for issues to do with child labor. So it is not like all this money is put in one basket and supposed to be used as, but all these other sectors now go implement those interventions like skilling. You are talking about the health, agriculture as a ministry. They also have interventions about geared towards reducing and eliminating child labor. So, and then of course the international community that we did talk about, the UNICEF. Right now, Uganda is about to start implementing a program called Accelerating the Elimination of Child Labor in Agriculture. Tobacco, tea, and coffee to start with. So there's already money coming from the development partners from ILO and then from USDOL. This is United States Department of Labor, supporting, and many other international partners. So we have the local budget, then also there's money coming helping us to address the problem.
The budget issue that I talked about was actually to get to the multi-sectoral coordination in here.
Yeah, sure.
And why I'm actually saying that is because when you talk about sanitation, for example.
Sure.
When you talk about sanitation in schools, now once you talk about schools, you talk about education.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about sanitation in schools, then somebody might invoke health and say, but that's health, Ministry of Health affair. Then when you run to health will actually tell you, no, that's again Ministry of Water and Sanitation, because there's also water and sanitation. And now the problem is in a school where Jagend or Mr. Opio or Amuriat is actually headmaster. And you find that Amuriat will actually say, no, but that's either Minister of Health or Minister of Water and Sanitation. But we have a sanitation problem in, and that's a kind of coordination I'm actually trying to look to and see. How do you manage it? How do you manage it as government? Because somebody will say, issues concerning child labor, please go to the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Agriculture will say, no. We're doing very different things. Education will say, we are managing this. Another will say they are managing that. And I'm just looking at that intersectoral coordination amongst government agencies.
Yes, the policy that I did, National Policy on Elimination of Child Labor of 2006, provides for a framework, an institutional framework, the sectors that are supposed to come and support. Of course, coordinated by the other day, if you may not have heard, the permanent secretary, when we are commemorating the World Against Child Labor at Hotel Africana, the permanent secretary did launch the National Steering Committee on Elimination of Child Labor, which is supposed to be like an overseer and then supervising all activities to do with the child labor, where all these other sectors, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of all, and including our social partners, development partners are members. So that steering committee helps us to coordinate. Although, of course, we have had challenges, but especially this National Action Plan 2, 2021-2025. This is going to help us address issues to do with the legal framework, strengthening it, and then also strengthening issues to do with the coordination, and then of course networking.
And the other thing I just wanted to highlight, because I liked the way the government is approaching the budget now, because the budget is being approached from a programmatic point, as opposed to ministries operating in silos.
They're moving here from the sector budgets to program-based now.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. So I think that's a very good way to look at it. For instance, if you looked at the human being in totality, then it's easier, human capital development. Then you can look at the skills of the person, you can look at the health of the person, you can look at the housing of the person, then you can look at all these other aspects. Just to complement on what the Assistant Commissioner said, I think it's a very good way to address including child labor.
Have we secured any convictions that we can use as a deterrence for people who have persistently employed children? Because I'm sure that these people who do these things actually know that they're employing children. In agriculture, for example, commercial agriculture, commercial sex activities, I think this is also there. Yeah. In mining, for example, these people who do these things are actually exploiting these children, knowing very well that if you have them here, the only thing you're going to do to them is feed them.
Give them food,
Give them food, let them stay in the mines until evening. Have we as a country secured some convictions that we can use them as a deterrence that Jagend or Opio Mayakoli will know and run away from exploiting the children?
Well, yes, the law provides for prosecution of the offenders, especially these people who engage children in work. But the approach has not been that punitive. That the focus has been trying to kind of like promoting self-enforcement, and of course through awareness we've been telling employers, please, I think what you are doing is not right. And many of them have, like Ms. Opio did mention, these ones who are already in the formal sector. For them, they have even come up with the policies actually outlawing the employment of the children. Like I did mention when we went to Kayunga early this year. Kakira Sugar Works, and then of course Skoll. Those ones, and of course the problem here is that it is usually the subcontractors who engage the children, not the companies directly.
True.
So there is some kind of loophole there that we need to plug. And of course now through awareness and maybe, but I think we may be forced to go there because recently we realized that we need to begin to prosecute some of these employers, and we are trying to seek support of the DPP to build our capacity of the labor officers to be able to prosecute in the courts of law, in addition to, of course, the industrial code that we have. So I think beginning next financial year, which is July, the office of the DPP is going to train our officers. So, but we have not yet secured many convictions as far as.
Of course, I see the complexity which the government has. Like these suppliers we are talking about, they are sometimes even the parents of the children. Now, when you imprison the parent of a child for engaging them in child labor, you're complicating the problem.
Because you leave the child there for nobody.
Exactly. So I think that's why the approach the ministry has been using is actually good. Okay. The community policing part of it, trying to sensitize, trying to persuade, as opposed to being overly aggressive. Okay. You may exacerbate the situation.
Your clarion call to the people in 1 minute.
My clarion call is that work is not a child's business. Please allow the children to be engaged in school now that they are required to stay home. Give them the opportunity to relax until such a time when they are able to go and engage again in school. Children shouldn't be involved in work at all, especially child labor. But if they have to support the family to do household chores and stuff like that, it's okay. But do not engage them in commercial activities. Okay,
finally, Mr. Assistant Commissioner.
Yes, I would like to, as I noted earlier, that the child labor is a multi-sectoral problem. It, of course, takes it two to tango. So my call here is that it is our collective responsibility, all of us, to come and ensure that the interventions that government is coming up with are supported Employers are playing their part, the workers are playing their part, and the parents are playing their part, the community, the local leaders. So if all of us rightly place our role, then the child labor in this country, especially those in the worst forms, can be eliminated. Like I did mention that we have a commitment under Alliance 8.7 to end child labor by 2025. It is a mountain that I know it is surmountable, but I think when 2025 becomes, especially with this plan in place, if we go by it, I'm sure something will be done. Okay. The children who are future leaders of this country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muriat Bernard, the Assistant Commissioner for Labor Inspectorate from the Ministry of Labor, Gender and Social Development. I thank you so much for your time and for allowing to be with us this morning on GMU Extra. And thank you so much, Mr. Douglas Opio, the Executive Director of Federation of Uganda Employers. I want to thank both of you for being here today. We'll stop it here. My name is Jagenda Samakola Ziksoka. Thanking you so much and wishing you all the best for today. Let's stay safe and keep ourselves safe against COVID-19. Blessings and good morning.
Live